As you can see, I've entitled the series 2,000-Year-Old Footsteps, and it's a series of presentations, PowerPoint presentations, just looking at some of those locations where Jesus placed his foot. The topic that we're looking at today is Galilee, and this is the one time I'm going to give a little bit of an apology, because as I looked at my diary here, about 4 years ago there was a sermon where some of these slides appeared. So please forgive. You have seen some of this, but not all of it. So here's the context of Galilee. First of all, as we look at the story of Galilee, the Palestine in Christ's time, we are looking at the fact that the geography here is a rift right down the centre of Palestine, and it's the Jordan Valley. The Jordan Valley. That's the river that connects the Sea of Galilee above and the Dead Sea below. All right? And that's where Jesus held his ministry. Let me go a little bit further on that map. That territory is divided into 3 regions. Galilee in the north, which, by the way, Jesus spent most of his time in Galilee. We kind of think because the record covers probably about equal times in Galilee and in Jerusalem or Judea, that he spent a lot of time down there. Not a lot, actually, compared to how much time he was in Galilee. So today we're going to look at Galilee, and then of course between Galilee and Judea there was Samaria. Not a happy relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans at the time of Jesus, although every time he passed through, he took the opportunity, as you remember, with the woman at the well in Samaria. So that's one particular story. So we're right there then in Galilee today. Now, when you look close at a map of Galilee, there's 2 Galilees. One is the sea. The Sea of Galilee, as it's called, or lake, really, as it is. And the other is the region, because west of the sea, all that territory almost going out to the coast, was what was known as Galilee in Jesus' time. And so when we're using the word Galilee, usually the context will determine which of those 2 Galilees we're referring to, the sea or the region. And you can see that today, particularly while we're identifying Nazareth and Cana, the place where Jesus was born and he began his ministry, his first miracle at Cana, we're not enlarging on that. Tiberias will be touched on. Capernaum will be touched on. Next time I take this opportunity, we're going to look at Capernaum in a very significant way and what archaeology has shown us about there. It's quite incredible, actually, when you go to Capernaum. And also Gergesa over the other side, on the eastern side of the lake. That comes into our lesson this week, so I thought we'd better give them a quick mention as well. So, okay, we're off then on our journey, the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is barely 20 kilometres long and only about 13 kilometres wide at its widest point. And it's these slides are just rotating through. And this is how I can get through a lot of slides. Just put them on automatic and just, stop talking when they stop. This is the countryside where Jesus spent most of his time, out amongst the fields, using the sower out in the field as an illustration. And if we look at his story, so much happened around the shores of this lake and beyond. This is actually Capernaum, which is where we're going to be next time. And we're going to look at those 2 buildings that you're seeing there. One is a ruin, the other one more recent. A fantastic history behind that. Tiberias, by the way, is the greatest city in the territory there of Galilee today. And it certainly would be a city that Jesus was maybe just partly familiar with, because it was built during the 1st century and even started about as early as Jesus' ministry here on earth as well. But it's become today's greatest city. All right, now you can't go to Galilee without realising that Galilee, with all its stories and all its history, has a lot to do with boats and fishing. And our lesson this week was talking about 2 boat stories. And one boat story was, you remember, all the disciples were totally frightened, I guess is the word, because they were put into the boat, and notice when it was the end of the day, and they had to go across to the other side of the lake. It says across the other side. Now, they were going from probably about where we were looking a little while ago, where Gadaria is in that area, sort of a little bit northish, probably going back to about where Capernaum is. And on the way, a storm comes up. end of the day. Now, that's very significant. This photograph, taken 38 years ago, by the way, and of a slide, and it's been converted into one for the screen. And I've just enlarged the middle part of the sign where it says, danger of sweeping by western. It says winds. I think it means winds. And the way perhaps somebody not familiar with English and doing that sign didn't realise that they put a P in there instead of a D. But there are western winds, and that's exactly what happens usually at the end of every day. These winds that come howling in from the west. Now remember, the Sea of Galilee is also 215, I think it is, meters, 215 metres below sea level. We only think of the Dead Sea as being below sea level. It's double that distance. It's about 430 metres below sea level. But so is Galilee. And this creates a very interesting geographical circumstance that creates this almost daily rushing wind that comes down from the west. And if you have a look at a typographical map of Galilee, it's a huge basin that actually, the sea sits in and the towns around it, etc. And it creates this enormous gushing wind that comes whipping down from the west and can be quite destructive, and a very calm lake that you've seen in all my photographs because we're there in the middle of the day. But you can get caught up with this, and obviously the disciples did twice. Also interesting to notice in Caesarea, this is in one of the streets in Caesarea, again, 38 years ago, that I happened to notice all the trees leaning to the east. And when inquiring, it's the wind, the prevailing wind at the end of the day is what's done that. So that's something for you to remember. How come on this tiny little lake, these enormous storms get up, that fishermen get afraid and scream out for help? Why? Here's the reason why. All right. Now, fishing. Yes, fishing was the major source of income in Galilee in the past, and still is a source of income. They still gather, I'll even show you a picture in a moment, of what's called a St. Peter's fish. And for example, the fishing boats, a lot of them are used for tourists and tours around the lake, which, again, we've always enjoyed doing that. And on this particular occasion, I was asked by the guide who was explaining all things about the lake, hold up this map of the fish that are found in the Galilee Sea still today, and amongst them, the shine, you can't really see it with the shine. One is still called St. Peter's fish, because remember Peter was told to go and get a fish. What kind do you find? And that's coming here out of there. And that particular fish, well, a fish anyway, has been given his name. So that's the point of interest there. But the thing that I really want to share with you, is this. This is a very significant site in recent years. Again, 38 years ago. This was the year of my first trip to this country. In fact, it was the end of the last year that this happened in 1885, and then it was in 1986. I'm right now. 1986, when I visited there, in January, just 3 months before I was there in April, they found one of the greatest archaeological findings that you can probably the local people would think is really available. Look, even Relme has walked past this significant... Sebastian's trying to find it. He's looking for it. But in that mushy water there, the level of the lake was so low that what they found, two fishermen, brothers, who worked in a local kibbutz, they noticed that sticking out of the low-level water, there was a part of a rib of an old boat. And so they quickly did a little bit of excavation to realise, hey, there's something valuable under here. And so they continued, called in the authorities obviously, cut the area off, and they began to excavate this. They had to do it very quickly. In fact, 12 days and nights. The records say 12 days, 12 nights. They worked non-stop, knowing that the water would be coming down soon, and the water would rise, and they'd have to get this boat out. And so to get it out, what they had to do was that they had to cover it in polystyrene, in fiberglass to give it structure as well, but polystyrene because it was so so soft and it was due to break up. And finally they got it out, and these photographs all came off the wall, by the way, in the museum that they now have there. And you can see how that they eventually get it to a floating situation, and they float it up a little bit and then lift it out by crane, and then it goes into a tub of chemicals, first of all to get rid of all the polystyrene and fiberglass, etc., then to harden the wood, and it's soaked in that for about 12 months just to harden the wood. And then finally you see what was left after they cleared away. Oops, don't do that. There we go. After they cleared it all away, look what they've got. They've got the remains of a hub. So in come now the experts to date it, carbon dating and all other forms. Pot. They found one pot in there as well. There was also a lamp, an oil lamp they found in the remains in the bottom of the boat, and some nails, etc. I guess we can see where they came from. But they dated it, and guess what they dated it for? 1st century BC. So this meant that this would have been a boat, a fishing boat, as they continued to analyse it, a fishing boat that would have been in existence on the Galilee when Jesus was around. Guess why it's got the name? The Jesus boat. And anyway, who can prove it's not the boat that Jesus didn't use? So let's keep calling it the Jesus boat. But of course, what do we do now? This is interesting that they've made a model of what they believe it would have looked like in its original form. But look at the ribbing in it. And this was cypress timber on the main, but altogether about 10 different forms of timber were used in it. But anyway, cypress timber, and so they put it all together, and it's now on display. Built a small museum around it with the story. As you can see, it's quite a building. And tourists come through by the thousands to see the Jesus boat, a boat that was around in Jesus' time. And I think, go back from that because I looked at the clock and I'm not going to do that section. So this is interesting in that it helps us see that, yes, the stories of the Bible, this is 9 metres, by the way. Let me go back one more. That boat that you see there is 9 metres long and about 2.5 metres wide. And they say that about 15, 16 men with all their gear can comfortably be seated in that boat. This could well have been, if not the boat, and it probably wasn't, it is well likely the type of boat that Jesus was floating around Galilee with his disciples and pushed off from the shore to preach from, etc., etc. You can appreciate why it's become a huge attraction for tourists today.